Yeah, cool. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us for this data retrospective. So, Michael, are you all right? Are you all right just flicking through the slides, Michael? If we give you
Yeah.
give you a nod.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're just gonna sort of quickly run through the lessons learned from the data loading that we did a few weeks ago for NFT and SitOps. Now, I think it's particularly relevant, this, and I think this is a sort of scope we need to look at it through, is that when we come to do our final data load, so this was the penultimate one. The final data load is going to be for regression and the final settlement testing, and then those MPANs can then be used in SIT-A from a sandbox perspective following the end of regression. So I think it's particularly relevant, this, because what we're wanting to do is load exactly the same MPANs that we loaded into SIT-B. We're wanting them to load them into SIT-A, support regression. So any issues that we've encountered here, hopefully we'll have understood what they are, resolved them, and then it should mean, touch wood, but because for the first time ever, we're going to be using exactly the same data augmentation and then data loading processes. So, if we addressed all the issues from NFT, then we know that touch wood, the data load that we do for regression is going to be a smooth and an efficient exercise. That's certainly the intent. Now, there are a few differences that I'll call out, but as we go through this, but that's sort of the purpose of today's sessions, really, is to make sure that we've captured all of those sort of lessons. We've addressed all of the issues, and then we know that when we come into regression, it's going to be much more effective. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as I said previously, unfortunately, every time we've done the data load, we have to adopt a different approach, which in itself then causes sort of challenges. But primarily, the big difference between the NFR data load and the data loads we've done previously is we have to adopt a different technique with loading data into MPRS and some of the other systems, because we have to work around the new connection process, which meant that we couldn't use in effect completely manufactured MPANs as we'd done for cycle-free data loading. So for this data load, we had to pick MPANs that were in the central services as in a created state. So they've been created by the LDSO, but they hadn't yet had a supplier registration made against them. So the majority of the augmentation that we did for NFT was to take existing MPANs, assign them to suppliers, appoint agents, set the meters up, and in effect get them in a what's called an operational status, which means people can then use them. And we did two other sort of quite large pieces of development for this as well. One is that we created much more sort of complex metering setups. So we had meters that had main and check, MPANs that had main and check on, MPANs that had multiple registers on meters, so economy 7 type setups. And we also produced MTDs, because that's always been sort of a big request, if you like, that we've had in the pipeline, which is that rather than participants having to create MTDs, that we'd create them. And obviously, that had a number of challenges in terms of the development that we needed to do. So as I say, the sort of whilst we might not have needed to create such complex data for NFR and ops testing, we wanted to create this complex data so that we would then subsequently load it into SIT-A, one to support regression testing, but two, just to make sure that there was a complex set of data in the system, so people want to use that data for sandbox testing after regression has ended. So I suppose a lot of the development that we did for NFR testing was well, I keep saying NFT, actually. I don't know what NFT stands for, but it's definitely not non-functional. But a lot of the testing that we did, or data creation that we did do here, was really with a sort of eye on SIT-A rather than people needing those MPAN specifically for NFR testing. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Michael. Yeah, cool. So just sort of running through what we did. I suppose the difference here compared to previous activities is that St Clements aren't involved in SIT-B. It's the reg services are operated by CNC on behalf of BU UK and SSCN directly for their South MPID. So it was sort of the first time that those guys had done the data loading that historically had been done by St Clements. So the data loading we do there, and these are all the messages that we generate. But ultimately, it's to get the MPAN from a skeleton MPAN, if you like, all the way through to having the relevant data associated to it. And there was a few challenges around this, which I'll come on to later. Next slide, please. And yeah, it just gives an overview of what we've created. So I think for NFR testing, we sort of created just under 16,000, so just under 2,000 MPANs per cohort. And so that was a mixture of smart, advanced, and metered. If that cohort had an unmetered supplier in, and obviously, a requirement for that was that we generated MTDs, or in the case of unmetered, D0388s, to allow participants to load the full data set. If we go to the next slide. So I think this is sort of a record of the issues we did have now. I think the number of issues was relatively low, and a lot of them were driven by sort of the complexity of the new stuff that we'd done. So multiple meters, which we'd never done before. Doing the MTDs and so on. I think what really compounded us, and what will have caused quite a lot of frustration to people loading the data, but also ourselves, was we encountered an issue within our Azure environment, which generates all the data. So Microsoft were due to be making a quite significant change to Azure and the containers that we use in Azure on the 1st of April. So we assessed that and determined that we'd have done the data loading prior to the 1st of April, so it wouldn't be impactful. However, what Microsoft did do, without, I think, communicating out to their customers, is they actually stopped the ability of users to be able to update the containers. So we had a number of issues that were identified, but we couldn't then use all of our code to when we resolved those issues, to update the containers and allow us to generate the data. So what would have normally taken an hour dev work on our side to fix and reissue became a manual workaround, which was taking sort of over 24 hours once we'd corrected the issue, to then be able to manually generate all the data back out to people. And also the Microsoft issue prevented the code from compiling correctly when we'd made changes. So we then saw some regression issues introduced as well, where we fixed one thing, but then it broke MPANs that were previously okay. So it did cause a number of issues, this, and I apologise for that, but equally, we did have some members of the data cleanse team who were having to, in effect, wake up on the hour, every hour over the night, just to kick off manual processes. So there was a lot of hard working that went in from the data team just to hit what was what was the timescales that we were working to. So I do appreciate the frustration there, and obviously I suppose ultimately it was something that was caused to us by by an external organisation that was pretty much out of our control. But I think what we have done going forward, obviously from a lessons learned point of view, we've now made the relevant changes. These containers are no longer going to be utilised as based on this Microsoft change. We've made that, we've tested it, and so we shouldn't have any issues thereafter. I think there was a slight, there was a sort of delay then on UMZO's being able to generate D0388, which again required some code development on their side, which was implemented, and that won't be an issue going forward for when we do the next data load. And then we have some various issues around the data itself. So we had some leading zeros in one place, but not another, that caused some systems to have issues. So I think what I would request there, obviously the stuff that's in our control, we've addressed, and we've made the changes, and that code has been updated, or the data's been updated itself for the next round of data loading. I would ask that subsequently, maybe over the last couple of weeks, over the next week or two, if people do find any other issues on the SIP-B environment that's data related, please let us know. Because what we obviously want to ensure is that if there are any other issues, that we've addressed them, and we don't repeat those issues when we provide the data out to you guys for regression. The other point to note is, I think Michael's going to send some comms out. If he hasn't already, he will later today. We've now produced all of the regression SIT-A data, and we've put that, or we're putting in the process of putting it on the SFTP today. So there will be some comms to come out today that just direct people to the data sets, the full data set that we're wanting to use for regression testing. I think within the plan, we said that we were going to provide it out sort of towards the end of this month, but we've provided it early. And if people obviously have time to go in and maybe sample check some of that data, that would be very helpful. Just in terms of sort of in good time, making sure that we've addressed any issues in there. But as I say, because we've effectively replicated the SIP-B data that people have already loaded, we've obviously excluded any NPANs that fell out of data load because of issues. But if there's any sort of subsequent data related issues that have been identified, please let me know, and we can make sure that we've sorted them out before we come to load the SIT-A data. Stuart, would you like to come in?
Hi, John. Yeah, thanks. Just a thought on that, sort of like early visibility of the data. And I know we've been through this a number of times before, so it feels like this is like the last opportunity. When we get that early visibility of the data, it often comes with an instruction not to load. But the actual issues aren't really experienced until you come to load the data.
You load them. Yeah. I think,
and it's sorry, go on.
No, go on. Sorry,
I was just going to say it's very difficult to spot visually, or as a pre-check, it's very difficult to spot issues until you actually go to load it up. I wonder whether there is an opportunity to say, here is a sample of data that you can load in order to perhaps identify some of those things.
Okay, I think we could issue some advice. Like, I think as long as let's take that away then, because I think what we could do is that one of the problems we have though, Stuart, is that because it's like an interconnected environment, so obviously there's some stuff that you simply won't be able to load because you won't have the we have
you're dependent on other systems.
But I think let's take that away. Prem and I'll have a look at that, and maybe we just ring fence like 1 or 2 NPANs from each category or something like that, and so you can load these.
It just strikes me that we miss this opportunity to really check until we start actually loading. And anything is a best endeavors until you actually get to the load. Whereas if we could actually do something, it would be.
I think that would help. Let's take that away and have a look at it, because I think one of the challenges we obviously did have is like the 268, 150, 149s was brand new to us, and we don't have any reference systems to really test them against. All we can really do is sort of eyeball them and say, does it look sensible? And I know that's the same for the IFs, really. It's the same for everything, unfortunately. But I suppose particularly with the MTDs, we didn't really have we don't really have any way of validating other than say, well, that looks like the example that you guys gave us.
We're in a more fortunate position with that, aren't we? So
let's take that away and see if we can do that, and just ring fence some, because it could be that, like, we are sending out all the NPANs today, so it could be that if people do want to actually load some in SIT-A now, to go ahead to do that, and then just let us know, just tell us I've loaded these particular NPANs, and then we can just exclude them that might be an easy way of doing it. Is if people do want to have a test of some, you use the data that we've sent out today, and then just let us know if you have loaded any, and we can just exclude them. That might be an easy way of doing it. It's rather than me sort of overly prescriptive.
Yep.
I don't know what you think, Stuart. If that.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it was more the ability to load some, and yes, if there needs to be some oversight in terms of you understanding what has been loaded or what hasn't been loaded, then obviously people can feed that back.
Yeah. And like what I would add as well is obviously we are using exactly the same data set, but when we come to do regression, we're going to be setting all the MPANs up in a pre-migrated state, in a legacy state. So for the regression data load, there won't be any IF loading.
Yeah,
it'll just be, people will just have to load using the CSV as they did for the previous migration data, and then obviously we're providing all the MTDs as well. So that, I suppose that is the nuance. It's exactly the same MPANs with the same attributes. It's just that they're going to be in a legacy state rather than the sort of MHHS state.
Sorry, John. Just so on that. So from that perspective, speaking from a metering service perspective, we would load using IF33, IF36, and the MTDs, which would give us a MPAN in a migrated state.
Yeah, so I suppose if you're doing some tests, because really all you're going to be testing then, Stuart, is are the MCDs fit for purpose?
Yeah.
Because as a metering service, you're only going to be appointed for regression when the supplier enacts the actual business process. So we have got a session in the diary for tomorrow where we're going to walk through the data loading approach, for regression. And a core part of that is because all the MPANs are starting off as in a legacy state, then the metering service, data service won't have any data because they haven't been appointed the MPAN's legacy. Helix won't start off with any data because there's no MPANs in the new arrangements. DIP won't start off with any data because there's no migrated MPANs. So really, the data loading that's going to be done for regression, because we're getting them set up in a legacy state, it'll be the MPRSs loading them in. It'll be CSS, DSP.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It'll be supplier, and then everybody else is just going to sit there with empty systems, waiting for the first part of the next phase, which is prepping for the settlement testing we're going to be doing, which is where you'll see within the data that we sent out today, each cohort has got 50 MPANs for settlements. So the first part, and I think I'm not sure if Scott has walked through this previously. I think we have had a session, haven't we, where we've talked through, maybe not the data guys, though, we've talked through the approach to the next phase. But those all the MPANs will start off legacy. Each cohort will migrate 50 MPANs that they're going to use for settlement testing. And as a result of that will appoint the metering service, data service. We will then have provided you with MTDs that you can then load in as if they'd come from the MOP.
Yeah. It does ring a bell now. You're saying now you're explaining it.
and then the UMZOs will have set up the unmetered MPANs as being half hourly. So when the UMZOs get notified that a migration's happening and a UMSDS has been appointed, they'll then send out the D0388. So when you think about it in the context of, with the exception of suppliers and then effectively MPRS and DCC, everyone else will be starting off with empty systems, and their systems will get populated as a result of enacting the actual migration process. That will then end up with 50 MPANs being migrated per cohort. So the supplier will have 50 MHHS MPANs. The ADS will have, 20 MPANs have been appointed to, but as we did for settlements, that'll allow them to undertake the testing. And so what I want to do tomorrow is just to walk through the data loading process, because as you say, it's really, if you're a metering service, the only thing that will give you next time around that's relevant for your loading will be the 152.68s, but you're only going to load that, if you like, once you've been appointed. So it's not something that you'd load in the maintenance window. It's something that you'll load once you get the IF36s through from the process. So effectively, you're loading them as if they came from, a meter operator. So we can talk about that in a bit more detail. Hopefully tomorrow. I haven't put the slides together yet. I need to do that this afternoon, and then we're in a good position to sort through that tomorrow. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Michael. Cool. So yeah, I think the main thing that obviously came out here is that really hamstrung us was the this Microsoft issue. So we have fixed that. So if we do encounter any issues when we do the next data load, we will be expecting a much quicker turnaround. Whereas when we did it last time, we found that we were hitting relatively minor issues, but then it was taking us like over 24 hours to get the corrected data out to people, which was then causing a lot of frustration because it was just really pushing the timelines right back from what should have been a sort of Monday Tuesday activity right back to Friday. And then in terms of the tracker as well, so I think in that context, what we have done with the sample with the data that we're sending out today for people to look at, Prem's going to send out a separate spreadsheet which sets out all of the different MPAN types that we've created. So that'll be a range of MPANs that cover sort of functional type testing. We've then identified the 50 MPANs per cohort that for people to use for settlement testing, and they're all identified. The different types of MPANs are identified within the allocated test case. And Prem's going to send out a spreadsheet along with the comms that goes out that just says, this particular allocated test case code equals this type of MPAN, that has these particular attributes associated to them. If we go on to the next slide, this should be the last one. Yep.
Yeah, last one. Yeah.
Cool. So have anybody got any questions, concerns, queries, that they'd like to raise now? And as I say, now we've actually started using these MPANs in testing. If people have discovered any other issues, please let us know. Because obviously we either want to fix them or exclude those MPANs and not go through the process of loading any ones that are broken, for the next phase. No, it doesn't seem to be any hands. So yeah, thanks for people's time today. Have a good rest of the day, and hopefully the majority of people can join us tomorrow, where we'll go through the slides around. Is it tomorrow, Michael?
Yes, tomorrow.
Yes, yeah. To go
1:30.
through. Yeah, cool. So that'd be really good if people can join that, because just picking up on some of the conversations Stuart and I had there, they're obviously whilst we are using the same MPANs, the sort of who's needing to load what and how, is going to be slightly different purely because the MPANs are going to be in a legacy state, so there'll be no IF loading involved in the next stage. Hi, Stuart.
Yeah, sorry, John. Just that session tomorrow, is it going to be recorded? Because I'm just conscious of like Easter holidays and things, and I certainly won't be about to attend.
Yeah,
it will be recorded. Yes, it's set to record.
Yeah,
Great,
and
thanks.
How do people access recordings, Michael? Is it just like do we just go and get the file like off
No,
off the
after
comments,
after this session, we then send it comes out with a link to the recording on the collaboration
right.
base.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So
okay,
John, I'll upload that. I'll upload this once it's completed to the collaboration base, just in the back end, because we don't actually have an area for it on the collaboration base.
Yeah, and then the slides that I'm putting together as well for tomorrow's session, I'll walk through them, but those slides will be a bit of a sort of step-by-step activities, who's doing what, and so hopefully those we can send those slides out as well, and they'll be a good reference tool for people to use as well. And Tricia?
Does DCC have access to that invite? 'Cause I don't have it in my diary. Can I get the invite?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay,
And
I'll forward a copy to you, Tricia.
Thank you. I'll forward internally. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Yep.
like Tricia, obviously we've agreed, quite a lot of detail between ourselves, haven't we, about how we're going to do the data loading.
So if we don't need to attend, that's fine.
Well, no, I think it'd be good for you to attend, but I'm not going to go right down into the level of detail, that we've discussed, with ourselves. But I think it would be good for you to come along, just so you've got the wider view of things. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Cool. And then, has anybody else got any other questions before we close out? No. Okay. Well, thanks for everybody's time today, and hopefully see people tomorrow.